thank you for the invitation, and thank you for getting up on a Saturday and coming to the periphery to listen to me. How many of you heard what I said at the forum on Thursday? I mean, you were not. Yeah, you were there. Yeah, bit less than half. Just so I have an idea. First, I thought I should first give kind of a general overview, kind of a helicopter view of the economy and how we should think about it. Then this afternoon and tomorrow, I was thinking we should talk specifically about finance and the interesting thing in economics is that in a sense it's cyclical. It is as you know, things go there's a very heavy economic policy, and then things get better, and then people say we don't need the policy, and perhaps that's true, and then there is a kind of a crash. It's like a little kid on a bicycle saying, "Look, Ma, no hands," you know, and then, "Look, Ma, no teeth," right? it's a bit like that, and I think that the West is approaching the "Look, Ma, no teeth" moment, and that I think we see in Brexit. We see it with Mr. Trump and Mr. Sanders in the United States, who are on the opposite political extremes, but essentially saying the same thing, that free trade doesn't work for the United States anymore. So I came to Latin America as an 18-year-old because I was working for a project with Norwegian students. We were collecting money for Peru, and I came from kind of middle-class Norway and found myself on one morning on top of the garbage dump in Lima, Peru, and I wondered why people there were so much poorer. And the interesting thing I thought was that the people doing the same things as in Norway were so much poorer. Let's say the taxi driver, the people who handle luggage at the airport, the waiters, the barbers, all were just as efficient as those I met in Norway. So why should a bus driver in Peru who was equally efficient as the one in Norway, why should he make 20 times as much money? If they were doing the same things. So I thought that's something that I'll look it up in a dictionary when I come back. And I tried to find it, and I went into business. I studied economics. I went got an MBA at Harvard, and as I say, started my own business. And then before I was 30, I was still curious about this problem, which I hadn't found a solution to. So I got myself a PhD in economics, and then I looked back in economic history and I saw this cyclicality, and I saw that the same things kept coming back. So I wrote a thesis about these things, but then I sold my business about 20 years ago, and I went back into academia. So I think one advantage that I have is that I've been 20 years in business. I ran my own manufacturing company in Norway, in Italy, in Finland. So I know how it works. So I can say to the economists, that's not the way it works. I know that because I've been there. So I have that advantage of having the practical background. And also, I started. My first job was at the Latin American Institute in St. Gallen in Switzerland when I was still a student, and I was a Latin Americanist. I started study development in Latin America, and the interesting thing now when I come to the Ukraine is that so many problems are the same. You export wheat to Italy at a very low price, and then you buy the spaghetti back from Italy at 100 times more or something like that. Exactly the same thing as the same problem that Latin America had, and solved to some extent. The high cost of interest. I remember on the conference in Sao Paulo in Brazil was opened by the vice president of Brazil, who was a businessman, and he said, "Well, I have promised the president not to talk about the high interest rates. So instead, I'm going to talk about the high cost of capital." So these are they're very similar things, and that makes comparative studies so interesting. Every country is unique, right? But the gravity in economics is the same. So it's a matter of applying the forces at work in different contexts, right? And one very important context in the Ukraine is that you have a very big market. That is a big advantage, right? So Latvia got deindustrialized. 20% of the population left the country. But there's so many things you can't do in Latvia with 1 million people. You cannot build a solid, diversified manufacturing sector. But if you're more than 40 million people, you can. Right? So in a sense, the size, there's a minimum efficient size of countries, of economic units, let's say. And Ukraine is above that minimum efficient size. So that's good news. But I'll try to make a brief, an introduction now to the general theme, and then we'll dig into the details later. So this is essentially a short version of a 1 week's course that I give at Tallinn University of Technology, which is the same type of university as your polytechnic. It's what happened after 1860 was that engineering grew a lot, and the engineering didn't fit into the university system. So what they did was they actually established new universities to house engineering, right? And this is like your polytechnic and Tallinn University of Technology. But I think it's important that we see, what is it? What differentiates capitalism from pre-capitalist economy? What was there before capitalism? Because perhaps what we get after capitalism might have some similarities with what we had before capitalism. Some similarities. An Austrian economist who moved to the United States during the war, Karl Polanyi, he defines capitalism as having 3 fictitious commodities that did not exist before capitalism. And one is money. Pre-capitalist economies don't have money. So what do they have instead of money? Well, on the one hand, they are organized much like big families. That, inside the family you don't pay for the milk in the refrigerator. The milk in the refrigerator belongs to everyone, right? So there is a system of reciprocity, which is, I get married, you all come and build my house, and I feed you. Then one of you get married, and we all come, you feed us, and then we all come and build your house, right? This is the pre-capitalist system, and it's socially based. And I'm sure that in the countryside, in the Ukraine, some things still function like that. Kibbutz, yes, yeah. And even in the cities, there is an American woman, Jane Jacobs, who wrote about this. Well, it's really like this, that you bring soup to a little old lady living on the 3rd floor, and in the meantime, the butcher watches your baby who is in the trolley. So in even in cities, this functions. So it doesn't have to be market, right? And I think one of the things that Polanyi says is that what we see is the market taking over more and more of the social relations. And then there is a reaction and there's a counter movement, right? There are certain things where we don't want the market to enter. We have something called prostitution. That means that the market has entered in an area which we don't want it to enter, essentially, right? So money is important. And the other aspect, the other way of solving things without money is barter. In the Andes, for decades, not for centuries, the barter was one sheep for one sack of potatoes, right? So you had a barter relationship between goods. And if you have 10 goods, that's okay. But if you have 2,000, it gets complicated. And then comes money, and money is, in a sense, an accounting unit. It's something very valuable, but in one sense, it's something very, very banal. An accounting unit. And what you didn't have was labor as a commodity. Labor was not something that could be bought and sold. You contributed to the clan by working. And I've been fortunate enough to work with the Sami reindeer herders in northern Norway, the last Aboriginal tribe in Norway, and they produce reindeer meat, which is a luxury product. And inside their system, like in the family, work. You work in different places, but you're not paid. You just get part of like in the family, you're being fed and housed. And labor as a commodity, the idea of buying and selling labor was not common. And private ownership of land. That the whole Western Hemisphere, when Columbus came, there was no private ownership of land. So this is the way it used to be. And it's good to have that, I think, in the back of your mind. This is Karl Polanyi, The Great Transformation from 1944, which is an important book because it gives you something to compare capitalism with. It gives you a standpoint to see how it really works. And Polanyi also wrote this book about trade and markets in the early empires, and he's exactly the opposite of Adam Smith. Adam Smith says in the beginning there were markets. So he says the difference between a human being and a dog is that human beings barter and dogs don't. Adam Smith says, have you ever seen a dog bartering a bone with another dog? No, right? So, and the other people say, well, the difference between an animal and a human being is that human beings innovate things. Right? Beavers, this is Abraham Lincoln. Beavers build houses. Just as they did 10,000 years ago, they don't innovate their houses, but they build houses. Human beings innovate, right? So, one of the interesting things about Polanyi, who's against Adam Smith, he says that in the early empires, first of all, trade were between tribes; they were not between individuals. And secondly, he makes the point that the traders were at the lowest. They were the lowest hierarchy. The absolutely lowest profession were traders, which is interesting to what we think about today. In fact, we know that there was in Constantinople, in Istanbul, one of the rulers was so ashamed of his wife's father's ships, so he had them all burnt because it was such a shame to be a trader. I mean, very strange, very strange. But human beings, human mentality changes, right? And there are two kinds of economic theories in a way, and they split up the English stage theories with Adam Smith versus the German American stage theories. Think that when Europeans discovered America, or when the Americans discovered the Europeans, Europeans understood that they saw their own past. There was no agriculture, or in most of Latin America there was no agriculture. So they're like, aha, we have all been like America. We have all been in a society where there was no agriculture, right? So that gave birth to these stage theories, and I think they're important. First of all, there was the age of hunters, right? Human beings made a living by hunting and gathering. Then comes the age of pasturage and shepherding. Same thing. Human beings found that they could actually tame these animals, and life became much easier when they didn't have to hunt for them. They could have tame animals, right? So that's the next stage of human being. And then the invention of agriculture. And an interesting aside on that is that agriculture, these agricultural societies seem to have started where the different ecological niches were very close to each other. I mean, if you were almost half of the population in pre-Columbian America lived in the Andes, and the Andes, you go from the seaside to 4,000 meters in 2 or 3 days. It's very close. So from where there is fish to where there is cotton to where there is maize to where there is potatoes, from sea level to 3,500, 4,000 meters, it's just a very short distance. And when I came to Georgia last month, where really the origin of Western civilization, we talk about Caucasian race, right? Agriculture was born in the Caucasus, I think for the very same reason, that the ecological niches are very close to each other. So you can have a huge diversity of agricultural goods within a very small geographic area. There's a short distance from cotton to potatoes, right, or similar in the Caucasus. So then comes to Adam Smith. Then says the age of commerce, and the other says the age of agriculture and manufacturing. So all the neoliberals, they descend from the left-hand column, where commerce is the key. The others, where I come from, manufacturing and agriculture. So on the right-hand side, you see these are modes of production. I think this is 25 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, so we can use a useful term from Marx, which is modes of production. I think mode of production is a very useful term, whoever invented it, right? But the age of commerce, that's not a mode of production. All these things all these categories are about producing something, and then they pass to trade. And this is the problem. This is the problem why this theory cannot understand that it will be better for the Ukraine if they produce their wheat into spaghetti themselves, that would create a lot of added value, it would create a lot of jobs, than selling the wheat to Italy and buying the spaghetti back. This is, if you are on the left-hand side, you don't see it. So the task is to bring the public understanding towards the right here. Right?